Double inhales followed by an extended exhale are the fastest way that I'm aware of to bring the mind and the body into a more relaxed state. 2 inhales through the nose and then exhale slow through the mouth. 1 to 3 of those repeated will bring your level of autonomic arousal down basically to baseline.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I watch these videos every day because I need them for motivation. Being around successful entrepreneurs every morning helps me believe that I can do great things too. It's like your morning coffee, but for your goals, kickstarting your day with a blast of positivity. So here is a challenge for you. Try watching one video every morning for the next 30 days. And let's find out together if they help you do great things too. If you're in, leave a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can celebrate with you. So today, listen from one of the best, Andrew Huberman, and our take on his top 10 rules of success. Believe. Rule number 2 is love what you do.
If you love something and you want to learn as much as possible about it and you love the culture around it, you do have to learn how to sort out the untoward elements. Don't get yourself into trouble. But you take that energy, and I just took it to academics. I remember realizing when I got to graduate school, I found a wonderful lab to work in with a wonderful woman named Barbara Chapman. Unfortunately, she passed away. And at the time she said, listen, I'm going to have a couple kids, but we have grants. You can, so she said, I'm going to have a couple kids, so I'm going to be very busy, but we have grants and here's the lab. She said, don't burn the lab down. Don't hurt yourself, but just do experiments, have fun. And I realized, I was like, this is the best. And I had so much energy and I thought, I never have to go home. So I lived there a lot of the time, brush my teeth in the sink there, work out at the gym, shower, come back. And I remember people saying, you're going to burn out. What are you doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I would work 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. I was so happy. And I realized like, this is the exact same feeling. I'm just taking my interest and I'm just pouring myself into it. I did that when I was a graduate student. I did it when I was a postdoc. And actually when I was a postdoc, I started writing some music articles for Thrasher magazine. I've always kept some little tie to the skateboarding industry that way, just to make some extra cash. And then when I was a junior professor, I had to really pour myself just into the laboratory, but it still worked out. And I guess the point is that, you know, earlier you and I were talking about if you have, and I'm borrowing this phrase from one of my heroes, Martha Beck, who's a wonderful person and teacher, such wisdom, and she calls it a interest-based attention system. Mm-hmm. Some people might call it ADHD, but have you ever noticed that even people, and we know this from the scientific literature, people, kids, adults with ADHD, when they're in so-called ADHD, when they are doing something they really love, they're like a laser. They're not going to peel off that. Their attention is like level 11 out of 10. So I took that energy that I've always had in me for fish, for tropical birds, skateboarding, punk rock music, eventually it was biology. And I just went, okay, here are my chips. I'm all in.
Rule number 3 is replace negative thoughts.
I'm never going to argue that we can subjectively control all of our experience because there's some things that just genuinely suck, right? And when they, and it's important to register those not so great events or terrible events because they can drive us also. You know, we can be driven from a place of anger, frustration, and you know, revenge, or we can be driven from a place of, you know, love, gratitude, and et cetera. I'm not here to judge which one is better or worse, but the nervous system doesn't distinguish between them. So if you're the kind of person that needs to, you know, kind of budge yourself into something, great. If you're the kind of person that wants to do things from more of a warm, fuzzy feeling, that's fine too. What I will say is this: the ability to tap into this dopamine reward system, which is activated anytime you're in pursuit of something that's outside the boundaries of your skin and literally the boundaries of your body, as well as the reward system, the serotonin, oxytocin system, which is really about the things that are contained within your own body and immediate experience, things like gratitude and, you know, touch and comfort and things like that with loved ones. The ability to tap into both is crucial. Now, you said something really important, which was, well, negative thoughts. What to do? I don't believe that it's very easy to suppress negative thoughts. However, when you realize that thoughts can be deliberately introduced, you can start replacing negative thoughts with new types of thoughts. So you can always add something in. But when people start to realize that thoughts are very much like physical actions of reaching and picking up a glass of water, or taking a jog around the block, or typing an email perfectly. This is something I sometimes do because I struggle to do the perfect email. Not all my emails are perfect, but when I do one, I make sure that I I complete it and I think, okay, it's possible. It's not because the email being perfect is so important. It's because I want to remind myself that my thoughts and my actions are essentially the same. The nervous system can organize thoughts. So for somebody that's struggling, we have these examples like, oh, they were really back on their heels, or they were so depleted, no money, and all this stuff. What are they going to? We have so many examples like that. But in trying to make it actionable, it's really about saying, yep, that's all true. But I'm going to introduce a thought, which is, I made it through today. I made it through today, and that's actually worth celebrating at a micro level. So if you can give yourself dopamine rewards in small increments, right? You're not trying to celebrate that you made it through one day. Sometimes that's a huge feat, but most of the time, you just want to dose yourself with a little bit of that internal release of dopamine. You start rewarding incremental steps. And if there's anything that your listeners could take away from this whole thing about dopamine and reward schedules and being in movement, it's reward incremental steps, in particular, incremental steps that are about forward action. So maybe that's writing an email. Maybe that's that run around the block. Maybe that's something much grander for you. As you get better at things, right, the stairs get further and further away from one another because you've achieved more success. And so they tend to be, you have to take the rungs on the ladder further apart, so to speak. That's a time when you really need to implement not only the dopamine rewards, but also those serotonin and oxytocin rewards, et cetera. So to make it actionable, I would say, remember, don't spend so much time trying to suppress negative thoughts. If you need trauma therapy, pursue that with a professional. But if you have negative thoughts, just remember, I can also introduce positive thoughts. The same way I can control running around the block. Positive thoughts are the equivalent of forward physical action. And if you reward them internally, you buffer yourself against the quitting circuit, this norepinephrine circuit we were talking about before. You are building a stronger version of yourself completely between your own ears. And some people say, well, that's silly. It's like you're saying, oh, I'm going to jump up and down, reward myself for doing nothing. No, you're building the neural circuits that you can control self-reward. And in doing that, you can push through days and weeks of effort consistently. I don't mean necessarily all-nighters, but you can push and push and push.
Rule number 4 is practice nasal breathing.
People need to learn how to work through their anxiety. And that's like a lot of what my lab works on, like tools, double inhale through the nose till your lungs are full, then long exhale. That's the fastest way we know to really quickly calm down. Mm-hmm. This isn't breath work. This is just a pattern of breathing that we know can really dispel stress quickly. Yeah. So-called, it's like, when you just dump all this carbon dioxide, which is, so some people, frankly, a lot of people who are really overweight or even mildly overweight who have sleep apnea have more anxiety because they're not getting rid of CO2. Yeah. Oh, wow. So they're literally suffocating in sleep, and you'll see these people, they're mouth breathers. Not even necessarily just people who are overweight. So it's not good to be a mouth breather. You don't blow off enough CO2, anxiety goes up.
You should sleep with like athletic tape on your mouth so you train yourself to breathe through your nose, because apparently it's way better for you.
Yeah, I'll do cardio. I do a long run once a week or some long cardio. I do it. I try and not mouth breathe the whole time.
Can it also change face shape?
Yeah, so there's a wild book called Jaws, A Hidden Epidemic by colleagues of mine at Stanford, and they have these twin studies. One kid grows up in a culture where they eat a lot of soft food, drinking Capri Sun, eating applesauce, baby food. The other one is, got stuck in the jungle or whatever it is, and they're chewing on bones and chewing their food. And one kid, these are identical twins, has beautiful jaw structure and high cheekbones, and the eyes look nice and clear. The other kid is like droopy, the teeth are there, and their mouth breathing. They show this. There's one case of this young girl who she got a pet hamster, I think it was, got a allergy to the hamster, and literally took this beautiful young girl, and her face just starts aging at a rapid rate. They get rid of the hamster. She goes back to nasal breathing. They do a little encouragement of nasal breathing using the mouth closure thing at night, do a little bit of medical tape, and these beautiful, almost like model-esque features come back in this girl.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight our favorite lessons from the video that will inspire you to remember what you learned today and actually apply them. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is know your strength.
I think a moment in which a lot of people are searching for in their lives where you have a decision to do it differently. And I've always wondered what it takes for someone to get there. And is it something that you can accelerate towards? Like, if I'm laying on the couch right now and I'm feeling that, is there something I can do to get me there, or do I need more pain?
Fear. I'll tell you, super scary being like almost 19 years old. Girlfriend left me. I'm not good at anything. I wasn't good at anything. Not skateboarding, couldn't play an instrument. Everyone in that town surfed.
Family.
I mean, I could have gone to the fire service, and that's a wonderful career path. I didn't have any like marketable skills. I couldn't really do anything, except I knew my capacity to learn. I've always had a very good memory, and I've always enjoyed learning. So I thought, okay, school seems like a good option. They tell you what you need to know. In fact, at one point I realized, and I think it was Ryan Holiday that said that, the people who should absolutely not drop out of college are the people who are not doing well, because the real world is a lot harder in many ways. It's a lot harder than college. In college, they tell you what to do. I remember taking a class in Greek mythology. You go there, if you sit near the front, you pay attention, you try not to pay attention to anyone else, you sit down, they tell you what you need to know. Now, sometimes it's complicated, you can't keep up, but then they have these things called office hours where you can ask, they have teaching assistants. I mean, the whole thing is set up so that you almost can't fail if you do the required steps. Whereas with skateboarding, it's like I was always getting broke off, as they say. I was always rolling my left foot, snapped again, nothing, couldn't do it. There's so much uncertainty in other things. At least with a college education, for me, it was like, okay, I can learn this stuff. And then what I found is when there's a desire to learn, and then you learn, and then you do well, and I started doing very well. But there's that one class that I got a B+ in that I'm still pissed off about. My first year was a disaster. Then it was all A's. And then there's this one class in neural development from Ben Reese, and I got a B+. And as a consequence, when I went to graduate school, I studied neural development. It's the thing that you don't get, the place where you make an error that you forever carry that signal. I need to get better at that. So I think a lot of it is just having the knowledge of self, right? What did the Oracle say? Know thyself. The knowledge of self to really think, okay, like, what are my strengths? Do I like to learn if I'm interested in something? Do I have a voracious appetite? Maybe if you're a person with less energy, maybe you're more reflective, or you like to journal, or you need more time to process. I think turning what often appear as weaknesses into strengths is really possible. And then I do think that we are all each endowed with some unique gift. I really believe in this. It's not mystical for me. I think that we all have some wiring of our brains that's very similar, and we all have some unique wiring based on our genetics and our experience. And I just thought, I'm going to keep paying attention to what fills my body with energy.
Rule number 6 is focus.
For any of us, success in any endeavor is very closely related to how much focus we can bring to that endeavor. And the reward system, you start to realize, is entirely internal. No one's coming along and cramming dopamine in your ear or dripping it in your brain. It's all internal. And this starts to bring us into the kind of like discussion around mindsets. Because so my colleague Carol Dweck, who popularized this theme, growth mindset, it's, again, a very misunderstood concept. It's the idea that we can change, so that's built into that. But the discovery of growth mindset was of these kids that actually really enjoyed doing problem sets that they knew they couldn't get right. But for them, they would get this like dopamine release from just focusing on the problem. They liked doing puzzles they couldn't get right. It sounds crazy, but inevitably those kids are very good at puzzles and very good at math and these kinds of things. So growth mindset is, I believe, if it's sort of a neuroscience lens on growth mindset, would be that the agitation and stress that you feel at the beginning of something, and when you're trying to lean into it and you can't focus, is just a recognized gate. You have to pass that through that gate to get to the focus component. And then if you can reward the effort process, you really start to feel joy and low levels of excitement in the effort process. That's that buffering of adrenaline. That's that feeling like, yes, I've got a lot of adrenaline in my system, but I'm on the right path. It feels good to walk up this hill, so to speak. And when you start to bring those neural circuits together, you really start to create a whole set of circuits that are designed to be exported to any behavior you want. So if it's writing a book, great. If it's podcasting, great. If it's building a business, great. If it's building a terrific relationship, great. Then the circuits that Mother Nature has designed are incredibly generic so that we could adapt to whatever it is that we need to do. And I think the misunderstanding around how these circuits work has led to this idea that there's some secret entry point, maybe marked flow on the door, and there's a trampoline up to that door, and you just open that door and you're gonna be in it.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. And anyone who's done well in any career or athletic pursuit knows this, but unfortunately, there's a kind of obsession with the idea that it's all supposed to feel good. And it does feel good, but there's a whole staircase in which it feels kind of lousy.
Rule number 7 is embrace stress.
So there is something called adrenal insufficiency syndrome, which is a real medical phenomenon where the adrenals are incapable of making these cortisol and adrenal hormones. But the truth is that you have enough adrenaline and cortisol in your body to last 2 lifetimes and 25 famines. I mean, we were built with a lot of robustness, right? This explains, the David Goggins of the world. We all do have that greater capacity that people talk about. The stress is very misunderstood because people think of stress as this ancient carryover that's very unfortunate. It kind of gets lumped with depression, like, oh, this is just a flaw in our design or something. But actually, stress is wonderful. It actually activates our immune system. So anytime you liberate adrenaline into your bloodstream, you also protect yourself against infection of bacteria and viruses. Because if you think about it, if we had to gather food and we didn't have it, and we had to then pack up and migrate long distances, you can't afford to get sick. And this is why people who work, and then rest, they usually get sick when they finally stop and rest. Really? Yeah, it's like the post-finals phenomenon in university, or after the season for a game, or the caretakers thing where you're taking care of somebody who's ill and you're just work, or taking care of young children, and then you finally stop to rest, you go on vacation, and you get slammed with an illness.
Why is that? Because you're being in your comfort zone now? Or
because stress turned off. And adrenaline, so that the stress response recruits the immune organs of the body to release killer T cells. In fact, Wim Hof breathing, I know you're familiar with Wim, of doing 20 or 30 deep inhales and exhales, and also combined with some breath hold type work, exhale, hold, inhale, hold, is known to stimulate adrenaline release. And one of the better papers that's out there, scientific peer-reviewed papers, is a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences where they brought in 2 groups. One group did Wim Hof breathing. The other group did just mindful meditation. Both groups were injected with E. coli.
This is crazy.
Right?
It's crazy.
Right? It's crazy. The meditators got fever, diarrhea, and vomiting. And the people who did Wim Hof either didn't get it or got it to a much lesser extent.
They felt sluggish, but
That's
not.
right. They didn't. Right.
Isn't that
This
crazy?
is not an experiment to do at home.
Isn't this crazy?
But it makes perfect sense because that breathing simulates a stress response. It stimulates cortisol and adrenaline, which signals
protects the body.
Right, which signals to the thymus, the spleen, and the other, the nodes of the immune system to liberate killer cells. And so when that bacteria comes in, the system is ready for it.
Your body is defending against viruses and disease,
That's right.
essentially. When you create a routine of healthy stress.
That's right. And we could talk about, we definitely you don't want stress on all the time. Sleep is really important, et cetera. But that stress response combats infection because it recruits immune cells.
Rule number 8 is harness fear for growth.
I do believe, however, that the best work, our most creative and best work, comes from a love of craft. But sometimes in order to find what you truly love, you have to be scared into setting off on a path to find it. And And that goes for relationships too. Sometimes to find the right relationship or relationships, it could be friendships, romantic relationships, et cetera, one has to be like deathly afraid of having to remain in the relationship that you're in enough to leave.
Rule number 9 is start your day with sunlight.
The reason I encourage people to get sunlight in their eyes, especially early in the day, is that it helps wake you up. It improves your mood, it improves hormone output, it improves focus. It's good for so many aspects of biology.
How do I do
and
it
helps
without
you,
hurting
and it
my
helps you
eyes?
sleep at night. Okay, so what you want to do, people have different levels of sensitivity. You want to look in the general direction of the sun.
Okay.
If it's low in the sky, it's no problem. You could literally look at it like this. Now, the higher it gets in the sky, the more imposing it is, and you'll want to close your eyes. If it forces you to blink, you need to look away from it a little bit. Indirect light is fine on a really clear day.
Yeah.
If it's very, very bright and you need to blink. I'd say take your sunglasses off for doing this. Eyeglasses and contacts are fine. And after, 2-3 minutes, you're good. Mm-hmm. And if you're walking to work in the morning, it's a nice sunny morning, but the sun, it's New York, so a lot of the sun's blocked by these big buildings, you just get the indirect sunlight.
And that's okay too?
That's okay. But through a window, these tinted windows that are everywhere here, or through a windshield, it's not going to happen. It's just never going to set this mechanism in the ways you need. So if watching a sunset, you can literally watch it.
Yeah.
Right? Isla Vista, we used to watch sunsets, right?
Yeah.
Ready to disappear off Del Playa with the oil rigs out there. And for the people who don't know, there are these oil platforms that sit off the beach in Santa Barbara, and it seeps up all this tar. But it's very beautiful sunsets out there, and you can look directly at it when the sun is low in the sky. When the sun is overhead is when it tends to be really bright. Don't stare at it directly.
And what is the advantage of this? It just wakes you up or something besides that?
So you have nerve cells in your eye that connect, that when that sunlight hits them, they send a signal to your brain that's a wake-up signal.
Gotcha.
Improves your mood, increases testosterone, it increases metabolism, it lets you focus better, and it sets a timer so that you can fall asleep at night about 12 to 16 hours later. If you're not getting light in your eyes, if you wake up and you're just on your phone, that's fine if the sun isn't out. But if you're on your phone for the first 2 hours a day and then you get outside and get sunlight and the sun's already overhead, and you go out with your sunglasses on, that kind of thing, you're going to find it's very hard to fall asleep that night.
Because you're not setting the timer.
That's right.
Oh.
Think of the morning bright light as your wake-up signal.
Got you.
Get as much sunlight in your eyes as you safely can throughout the day. I wear sunglasses, but not when I do this morning sunlight viewing. And then in the evening, try and catch some sun before it goes down. In the winter, obviously, that's going to happen earlier. Yeah. And then at night, you really want to try and dim the lights. I always say like the fighters at the fight last night, like wearing sunglasses. Yeah. Dim the lights, dim the screens between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Now, look, you guys were at the fight last night. I happen to be there too. I'm sort of a new UFC fan, so I'm not very educated on this, but it was really bright. It's not a big deal every once in a while to stay up late. I was up till 1:30, which for me is very late. But I would say 80% of the days and nights of your life, get some sunlight in your eyes and try and dim the lights at night. I mean, you're in New York, bright lights, big city, right? So you're going to have to do a little bit more sunlight viewing in the early part of the day. Okay. And if you wake up and the sun isn't out yet, once it's out, get out there.
Okay.
It has huge outsized positive effects on your health.
I get it now because I didn't understand it first.
Like a lot of guys and women say, I don't feel well. I'm having trouble focusing. I'm having trouble sleeping. Yeah. Before we could get into any discussion about supplements or hormone therapy or ice baths and saunas, all that stuff is great. But the number one thing for health is going to be quality sleep. And the best way to get quality sleep is to get sunlight in your eyes early in the day. And on cloudy days, when you can't see the sun, people always say, there's no sun here. I'm like, the sun is still there. Yeah. It's just, and you get a lot of sun through those clouds. Just get outside a little bit longer.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is aim for lifelong learning.
On a trial-by-trial basis, we know that when you fail at an attempt, on the next attempt, your forebrain is in a position to engage better. And this makes total sense, right? You feel that frustration, and you want to get the next one right. Well, you're harboring, or I should say funneling more neural resources. Your focus, that aperture tightens. Now you have to be mindful of that too, because when you have a failure and then you're gonna hit the bullseye. I'm thinking about a dartboard because I'm terrible at darts. Sober, I'm terrible at darts. I don't even drink. So that next trial, part of the problem is that focus can narrow so much that you can start to lose access to information that might help you if you were just to relax a little bit and dilate that focus a little bit. But in general, on a trial-by-trial basis, focus is the cue that your nervous system is going to be positioned to learn better on the next trial. Now, in terms of life experiences, gosh, I wish for everyone fewer failures and more successes. But, failures keep you humble. And I've had a lot of them. I mean, if people ever wanted and they, I'd be happy to tell you about. I've made a ton of mistakes in life, a ton of mistakes. Some of those were mistakes of persistence, like dumb decisions. I kept, it's going to change, and it's clearly never going to change. And then some were failures of misjudgment about other people or situations, and a lot of them were just plain failures, like the experiment didn't work, or it just wasn't the right thing. And you try and reframe those. I do think that we owe it to ourselves and to the people that we know to try and generate some wins here and there and try and help other people generate wins. In running a lab over the years, and I still do, you realize that you want your students to publish a paper and feel that success pretty early so that they can experience A, how much work it is, so they pick problems wisely, but B, so they can feel that like, oh, I can do this. And I think that, this gets into the psychological as well. I think that, yes, failures help, but successes help. And there, I think, I function best in a team. And I think that for those of you that feel like you're fighting some challenge alone, I do think that there are great resources to be had in trying to access other people as sources of support. I think that that's a great tool. There's this whole scientific literature around social connection and how that can help us reframe motivation and goals. Anyway, maybe that's a topic to expand on another time, but failure is important on a trial basis. People who don't experience enough wins for a long period of time, the brain is a prediction machine after all, and they start to predict failure. So it takes a bit more work to wedge oneself out of that. The discovery of growth mindset is worth thinking about. So Carol's discovery was these kids that, for whatever reason, liked doing math problems, even though they knew they couldn't get the answers right. These were sure fail problems. So it's the same kind of people that like doing puzzles. And these kids, not surprisingly, go on to do phenomenally well in a number of different areas of academic pursuit. But what's interesting about growth mindset is that it seems like there's some attachment of the reward systems of the brain to the action or the pursuit of a goal, not just achieving a goal. And when we step back and we look at what that really entails at a neurochemical level, we have reward systems in the brain. They generally fall into two categories. There are the reward systems that make you feel really good with kind of the here and now and everything that's within the confines of your skin and the things you already have, love of your dog, love of your spouse, gratitude for all the things you happen to have. And those are generally governed by the release of molecules like serotonin and oxytocin, okay? But then there's another reward system, which is the one that drove a lot of human evolution, which is the dopamine reward system. Now, dopamine is a very misunderstood molecule. It's often talked about only in the context of reward. Like, I'm going to work to this goal, I'm going to build my company, I'm going to, get tenure as a professor, whatever it is, and you reach it and you get this dopamine reward. And indeed, that's true. But what's often not discussed is that dopamine is secreted en route to rewards while you pursue rewards. Now, the ability to tap into that system, to subjectively amplify that pathway of reward in pursuit of goals, is an absolute game changer when it comes to things like anything challenging that of long duration or uncertainty or getting through this COVID, pandemic situation. But the amazing thing is, remember, the brain only does 5 things, and we get to decide which of those sensations and perceptions have relevance and which ones don't, or which ones are attached to a goal and which ones aren't. So growth mindset, in its purest form, is the attachment of these reward systems to the effort process, to the friction process, and not just to obtaining a reward. And just as a kind of final point to that, there's a very well-known body of literature in neuroscience, at least among neuroscientists, that talks about something called reward prediction error. And it says, if you can dose the dopamine subjectively as you go through the pursuit of something, and then have a lot of dopamine when you reach that thing, it's very likely that you're going to reinforce that circuit. There will be neural plasticity, and that circuit will become stronger. So the next time you will revisit those sets of behaviors. The opposite can happen too, where you're in real anticipation of something. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. And then you reach that goal and it's kind of underwhelming. And that generally triggers this circuit that I referred to earlier, this kind of disappointment or pro-depressive circuit. So dopamine is involved in reward, but it's also involved in the pursuit of rewards. And so as you reach a milestone, or as you tell yourself, I'm on the right track, this friction I'm feeling, this late night, this early morning, this hard conversation with somebody that doesn't feel good, I'm going to tell myself this is for a larger purpose. That's that subjective insertion, that abstraction that we were talking about earlier. And when you start releasing dopamine to those kinds of things, there's essentially no limit on the number of things you can do or the energy to do them. So just as a last point about dopamine, when we're in effort, we're always secreting adrenaline. We're always in pursuit, and it's draining, it's tiring. Dopamine has this beautiful capacity to buffer adrenaline. And you know this, you've experienced this before, because if you've ever been working really, really hard, maybe your team is depleted, everything's just a mess, and somebody cracks a joke, and all of a sudden, in an instant, it's like everything's reframed. That couldn't have been hormonal. Hormones work on the schedule of like hours to days to weeks. It had to be neurochemical. It absolutely had to be neurochemical, and that neurochemical is dopamine.
For some more incredible Andrew Huberman advice, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
When you go out in the morning, even if it's not at sunrise, but it's close to sunrise, or you look at the sun in the evening, what you'll see is yellow-blue contrast or orange-yellow. That's not the color of light that you're going to see when the sun is overhead.